Welcome back to the Lazina Experience, meaningful conversations with people who help us see ourselves with more clarity. Today, I am here with Kam Knight, and we are going to explore the topic of resistance. But today is part one of four, and we'll cover needs. Cam, so good to have you back.
Thank you very much. I am really happy to be here.
Yeah.
And just to tweak that, it's not so much needs, but it's wants. I know it's nuance, but you will understand why I wanted to make
Yeah,
that distinction.
I am here for it. This is your time, baby. Let's
Yeah.
make you shine. So how was your day today?
My day was fantastic. I was working with somebody, a new client. And, I get a little bit of anxiety anytime I onboard a new person because I'm all about delivering. It's not so much about selling because selling is easy, but I like to deliver and get results to people. And the first time I do like to make sure they get value. And she had a very profound experience with this work. So I was very happy. And as you can see, I am with joy.
Perfect. Well, I wouldn't know what joy looks like for you because for me, joy looks like a little kid wearing pink and running around without flip-flops, right?
Yeah.
But that's just me. But I'm
You
glad
know,
that you feel joyful.
yeah, it's funny because people have different definitions of what is joy and happy. And I'm on a very different spectrum for what most people would find it. That's not what actually is for me. The calmness that I have really worked hard to get to and be at is what I experience to be pleasure and joy. And for me, it is also being able to deliver. It feels good. I think for a lot of people, when they do work for someone else and the other person is very appreciative, it feels good and it creates a lot of joy.
So rewarding. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah. So today we want to talk about one.
Yeah. So to jump into it, I will kind of give an intro of who I am, what I do, and how this topic is broken down. And then from there, we can go.
Go for it. It's your
Yeah,
turn.
sure. So my name is Kam Knight. I'm a coach, international speaker, and author of a dozen books, many of which you see behind me that have sold over 500,000 copies and have over 10,000 reviews on Amazon. And now I talk about a concept called internal resistance, which answers a question I had my whole life, and that is, why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can or don't do it. And what I realized is that there's a part of our brain designed to hold us back, and it's actively working to hold us back. And I call this part resistance. And it's this brick wall that we hit when we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it. Now, interestingly enough, our own wants and desires can create resistance. It's hard to believe, but our own wants can be a hindrance to achieving them. And to understand why that is, the part of the brain that creates wants works separate from the part that allows us to act on and achieve the want. And again, this is really important, so I'll say that again. The part of the brain that creates wants works separate from the part that actually allows us to act on the want. So we have one part of the brain that's creating wants and desires, and in many ways, it's unrestrained. It's creating endless wants one after another. It doesn't check to see if a want is achievable or achievable for you, or if it's going to be fulfilling. It simply creates want. And in many ways, it's an on off switch that gets triggered by various cues. And if those cues stimulate us, it'll trigger the want. And so, one of the challenges the wanting mechanism creates is that it can create a lot of wants, more wants than we have time for. Again, it was never meant to see if a want was worth going after and pursuing. Its only job is to create with the wants. And other parts of the brain decide or were built to check to see if they're worth pursuing. And so, this is one of the challenges it creates, which I call an overactive want, where it creates so many wants and we're pulled in so many directions we can't move in any one. And this is just one of many challenges. And even within this specific overactive want, there's many nuances that we can talk about. But without going off and rambling, I want to give the mic to you so you can guide the conversation.
Well, so when you talk about wants, I feel like, in my experience with wants, my blocks were so tied to my self-worth. So when I say like, okay, so there's this part of me that, like you described, wanted something so badly, but I was so scared to go after it. And ultimately, it's because I didn't believe in myself. I
Yeah,
didn't believe that I could achieve it. I didn't believe that I was worthy of it. So I had to like peel back a lot of layers in order to even understand what my, from the basic level, what is the difference between wants and needs.
yeah,
And, understanding the needs can be something that is tied to my desire, but how I'm looking at it from so many layers can impact the level that I go. So, kind of coming from a different country into America, there's already this like disbelief that I could even do anything. That's
yeah,
so out of the reach. There's no way that is achievable for me. Nobody said that to me directly. Nobody made me, came down and said da, 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 da. It obviously came from a childhood experience of not believing in myself. So when I'm thinking, okay, what are my needs? And I'm like, okay, electricity, gas, the functional thing. And I never actually go into the desires and
yeah,
understand them from that perspective. So that's kind of my experience when it comes to wants versus I mean, there's lots of layers, but I just kind of,
yeah,
we talked about nuances. I wanted to like bring
yeah.
that up. That's what
So
I
this
think
is a
about.
great place to start. So you have a want that your brain creates, and then that want gets filtered by this part of the brain, which I call resistance. And when resistance decides if it should let you do something, it actually goes through a whole host of criteria to make that decision. It's kind of like going through a checklist of items. And one of the items it comes across is your self worth. If you don't feel worthy, or what I call undeserving, then the brain resistance, it's gonna keep you from going after it. So in this case, it's resistance that's causing the challenge for you. And I do wanna hone in on what you said because I remember when I first moved to America, the part of the world that we come from is so starkly different than the US that my brain, it was a complete shock to my brain. It was a complete culture shock. And although no one ever said this, my mind came to the conclusion that I wasn't good enough and I could never operate at that level. And it was as real as the sky is blue. And even if anyone would say otherwise, it was so true to me, I couldn't even listen to them. And again, like you, I had to do a lot of work to get to a point where I can feel worthy and deserving. In fact, the client that I was working on earlier that I told you about, that was the thing that we hit up as her block was she didn't have self-worth. So that's how resistance can create a challenge. But then you also said that you had a really strong want. And so that's, I talked about how having an overactive wanting mechanism can create challenges because if your mind is constantly creating a want for this and that, before you can start on one thing, you're pulled to another. And before you can do the other, you're pulled to something different. And you go back and forth between many wants and not able to move in any one. So that's overactive want. But a strong want can also create challenges. So this is the second challenge to our wants. And that is a strong want is a want for something really, really bad. It's often referred to as having a burning desire. And many coaches and experts talk about having a burning desire as a good thing. But I would disagree because when our wants grow, so does our resistance. A great analogy for this would be Einstein's theory of relativity. So, one of Einstein's theories, the theory of special relativity, says that space and time are not separate. The three dimensions of space, north, south, east, west, and up and down, as well as time, interesting enough, are the same. It's the same fabric. In fact, scientists and physicists don't refer to space and time separately, but call it space time. And in many ways, our wants and resistance are the same. It's the same fabric. So when our wants grow, so does our resistance. And our resistance growing makes our want grow even further, and that in turn makes the resistance grow even more. And very quickly, this becomes a feedback loop where we now want this thing really bad and can't have it really bad. And so this is how a want can create challenge to having it. When we have a strong want, it triggers equal amount of resistance. And that can make the want grow even more. And again, it can become this runaway cycle. We've all experienced moments where we wanted something really bad and things weren't moving for us. But as soon as we let it go, things began to fall into place. And that's kind of what happens here. But what's really interesting is that The way the mind works or how our wants work is when we're told we can't have something, we want it more. It's one of the challenges of humans in society. This is one of the challenges teachers, parents, and even police officers and legal systems have. Just by telling humans not to do something, they now want to do it, right? And this process can actually happen internally, meaning if we have undeserving or low self worth, when a desire comes up, it hits up against that undeserving, which says we're not going to go after it. But now that just makes a want grow even more. But then the undeserving and the resistance is designed to keep us from going after things we don't feel deserving for. So that part grows in us. And that just triggers a want even more. And again, very quickly, without us even knowing or seeing the process, we want this thing really bad and we can't have it really bad. I hope that made sense.
No, it made sense. So it made sense to me in in the aspect of how I understand things, right? So I feel like one thing can be explained in so many different ways, but in the way that you describe it, there's so much of myself that I can see within
Yeah.
that concept, right? Like I'll give you an example. When I am allowing myself to experience the healing of unacknowledged emotional impact from a relationship that's happened a few years ago. And the way that it ended just kind of completely tore me up. And so I'm like, okay, I need to go on all of these healing journeys. I got to do amazing things that allowed me to see myself. But what I realized I was stuck in is that, okay, I would go, and I love meditation is something that I've cultivated in such a beautiful way. So whenever I'm in meditation, I'm accessing those blissful feeling, the feeling of like when my body felt peaceful and joy and excited and whatever the feeling of the day is that I want to explore. And my heart would go into this yearning because now my mind is like associating those feelings with someone, a container. And when I'm doing that now, my mind, my thoughts start to go into, well, look at all of the ways that you couldn't have it, or you did it wrong, or that person did it wrong, and all the justification pull from what my heart really wants and desired. And my body is now resistant to accepting new ways that this love or this of the or these experiences could come in. When I am sharing all of this, because I feel like you have a way of breaking that down that could make even, that could unplant some more within myself or someone else that's listening to this right now. I felt like I was keeping myself in a loop because the alignment of the experience is not holistic in that moment when that process is happening. And that's where I'm catching myself like, okay, I'm actively recreating this very thing in my life that's causing that resistance to be
Yeah.
exploring other experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of interesting because what I'm hearing, there's a lot of stuff you're saying, but what I'm hearing is even your wants aren't healthy for you. Some of the wants that your brain is creating aren't even healthy. And I'll go into a little bit because when we have feelings of undeserving or we have limiting beliefs and beliefs like I'm not enough, I don't matter, and I am alone and on my own. Those beliefs create desires that kind of reinforce and perpetuate those feelings. So you're going to create wants for people who aren't healthy, who aren't going to show up, who are going to reinforce that you're not deserving and unhealthy, which becomes this feedback loop because it's like, I want this thing, I can't get it. It triggers feelings of, I'm not good enough. And then not good enough attracts the types of people that reinforce that, or the types of situations that reinforce that, or it makes it difficult to get those wants as it's trying to reinforce the fact that it's supposed to be hard to get it, or my life is difficult, and things of that nature. So, this is another challenging aspect of the wants. And a lot of conversation doesn't get talked about on the want side because, at least from my experience and experience that of people who I talk to, I go on a lot of podcasts, I have a lot of clients I work with. And the general sense is everyone's telling you to have wants and telling you you can do anything you want and go after things, but they're not talking about the nuances of how those wants and the challenges they create. If you go to several different events, whether it's meditation or personal development and whatever, they're all going to be creating different wants in you. One's going to say you should meditate. The other's going to say you should do breath work. Another is going to say you should do this. Well, now these events have created all these wants in you where you just don't have the time to do it all. And because we don't do it, then we start to feel bad. Oh, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So there are nuances. In fact, doing this work enough, I'm starting to realize this is a new concept I'm coming to. I haven't really shared it, but success is in the nuances. Like we can go out and learn how to do something, and two people can get the same instructions, but how they apply it, especially individually and specifically to themselves, will determine the result they get. So there's really no cookie cutter. It's all nuanced, which is why I like the work that I do, because when I talk about the topic of internal resistance, I'm really going into the nuances that aren't really being looked at, which is where all the gold and the magic is.
I so agree with that. And something that I've also witnessed is that there's so much about personal development that can get lost in shame. And
Yeah.
I find that at one point, I like to use and I like to tell a story from my own perspective because I feel like using examples and other people can remove me from the experience. But in this situation, I want to share the observation and the you perspective, right? Not you, but I find that there are certain personal development avenues or modalities where it can get stuck in the shame based, like you need to do better, you need to change your thinking, you have you know, that very rigid
Yeah.
kind of, I'm gonna motivate you because you're not motivated, and look at how
Yeah.
I'm doing it better, and if you make a mistake, well, you take ownership of it. But so much of that I feel is stuck in shame, which I think is one of those nuances that we can uncover, because when we're shame based, my nervous system is already like, I don't even know what's going on. What do you mean I got to take
Yeah.
accountability? But that's already my, I don't have safety enough to even do
Yeah.
that. But then there's this also this aspect of it, and I see this a lot in like more corporate kind of situation where we learn things in theory and we go and we lead other people in it, but we're not really practicing it, and we
Yeah.
end up missing the really magical moments that creates better connection with another person, to be actually in relational experiences with another person, because we're so stuck on to like, you need to be better, you have to do this. Everyone has such a unique life experience that those nuances are what's going to make it important for them to be able to work through and dig deep in. So I
Yeah.
feel like the integration of that is where there's like a missing gap, to even understand that what are the differences between my wants and my needs, and where is it in alignment with who I am. My thoughts create my reality, but is that thought in alignment? Is it coherence? Is it coming from a place that isn't blocked by the very limiting belief that I've been holding back within myself?
Yeah. So these are very good things you brought up. So I'm going to talk about both of them. Yeah, I do feel like a lot of personal development can be shame based. And I don't want to say it's bad or wrong, because for you it's not very conducive. For me, it's very motivating. It has been. It's what's kind of driven me. So I respond to I should be doing better and whatever. And it's probably coming from my conditioning, because that's how my parents and brothers were. And it triggers enough negative feelings that motivate me to do something about it. Whereas for another person, it'll trigger the same feelings, but instead of motivating them to do something, it actually has the opposite effect. And it is nuanced, so we have to be aware of how we respond to those things. And I definitely agree. A lot of it is out there is you have to do this, you're not doing this. And it does kind of come from a more of a ego perspective. And what I found is when somebody is doing something and they're getting results, they have this need to feel like they need to tell others to do that very thing. Like it's just a human nature thing. And it's almost like they feel better because they figured it out, or that they're doing it, and they're almost doing it to feel superior. And it's very unconscious. We don't realize it, to the point where we can think we're doing it to be helpful when we're really just supporting our superiority. So again, this is very nuanced on why that is. And then the other aspect of teaching without experience, I mean, it's huge. I think one of the challenges that we're facing right now is a lot of people are giving advice that they shouldn't or have any business doing. And in fact, one of the people that I learned from had a quote. The problem with most therapists and coaches is that they haven't done their own work. And what that means is it's easy to read something and logically think it makes sense and it works. But unless you apply it, you can't see where that information falls short and the nuances that is needed to make that advice work. And I have another mentor, and I love her quote. She said, teachers who don't follow their own advice are just preaching. And so, right now, we do have a lot of preachers and a lot of people who are inexperienced in the content that they're providing. And it's creating a lot of challenges because here's the thing, it's so easy to give advice. It's so easy. All you have to do is open your mouth and blurt out some words. Taking advice is very challenging because we have to hear what's being said, to understand, then to apply it, then to remember to apply it consistently. And if we don't get results, we just wasted all this time. And the person who's blurting out the advice, when the other person gets results, they want to take credit for it. But when the other person doesn't, they want to make it seem like, well, it was their own fault. So they put them in a position where they've created a way where they can feel superior without taking the blame or doing any work to it. And I do think a lot of people go into coaching and into some of these areas just for that. In fact, what I would even go as far as to say is if you're giving advice, it's likely advice you should be taking yourself. And the reason you feel the need to give it is because resistance is saying you can't do it, but to distract you from doing it, it says, oh, you should go tell others to do it. So that's what I call the tricks of resistance. And we'll talk more about the tricks in, I think, the third podcast. So again, it's these nuances. And yeah, I do. I've been to a couple of recently where I just thought to myself, I went to a couple of person development events and I thought to myself, you guys are doing more harm than good. The information you're giving out, one, is very outdated, like stuff I heard decades ago. And even then, it came from the 70s, which was revolutionary for the time. But as we're getting to, the nuances, there's a lot more going on. And yeah, it kind of makes me sad, to be honest.
You said something very important, and I actually just had but before this, I had a recording with someone, and we were talking about integration. How important integration is into everything that we do, and that is something that I truly believe in. Have you ever, or have you done any work with or studies around Alfred Adler?
He talks about superiority. In fact, the
Hmm.
concept of superiority comes from him. What he said is our superiority comes from inferiority. And in a way, uh, inferiority is both superiority and inferiority at the same time, or superiority is both inferiority and superiority at the same time. And I believe he was a student of Sigmund Freud. So, yeah.
Yeah, when you talked about superiority and for inferiority, it made me think because I go to a workshop every 2 months because I realize that as I'm on my journey, that very thing that you're sharing happened. I'm like, oh, I must share this with everybody. I must tell them what to do. They have to know. How can they not understand until I realize, like, internally, that's my work to do. And
That's
one
your
of
work to do. And the reason your brain was doing that was in a way to keep you from doing your work.
Exactly. And so I thought about whenever inferiority and superiority showed up, how can I gain more knowledge? And it was the integration process of that. And what I realized is that I put myself in these every 2 months, I go to an experiential inner child workshop because I went through the course myself, my children went through the course, and for years it had been so revealing and integrated into the work that my children and I do to repair. But then I was seeking to have that transformation outside. I needed it so badly to have it with other people. So now when I go to the workshop, I'm giving myself that transformation because not only am I going back to support others, whatever's coming up, I get to work on and I get to be a part of it and I get to see another person's journey and I get to witness that. So in my world now, if I don't necessarily call myself a coach anymore because I feel more related to like as a companion or as a guide because I like to have the experience alongside someone, the exploration. But by giving myself the opportunity to go to those experiences every 2 months, there's that energy of needing someone else to transform is no longer there, because I am now in this, and I'm in it as far and deep as I can go. And not so much to even like do the work, but also to give myself the chance to truly serve other people. And I think you know what I mean by serve, to be able to hear without the wounds, to be able to nurture the relationships and the connection without the resistances. And even if and when the resistances or the nuances comes up, I can actually be open minded and willing to go through whatever that is with curiosity instead of the shame. So
Yeah,
sharing all that to say, I definitely see what you're saying, how it relates to myself in the ways that I try to approach coaching in the first place, and
yeah,
some of the challenges that I'm also experiencing when it comes to communicating with other coaches or cultivating co-creation or togetherness as well.
yeah, yeah. And now that we're talking about the topic of superiority, I do want to add that I'm not above it. I may be talking about events I've been to or experiences as if I am saying that I've never done that. In fact, I will say superiority, and ego has been my biggest and hardest work. And that's saying a lot because the challenges I've worked through, the mental, emotional, physical challenges, I mean, they were hard. They were so hard at times I wanted to give up, not just the work, but on life in general, though nothing compared to doing the ego and superiority work. In fact, I'll go as far as to say there was a point where my superiority was so big I could make Donald Trump seem like a humble guy. I don't know how hard it is to imagine that, but it's a kind of where I used to be. So that's why I can speak about it in such a nuanced level. I've done the work there. And yeah, unfortunately, the way you're describing it, hearing without the wounds and nurture without the resistance, it takes a lot of work to get to that point. And I don't know if I'm even there. Right now, I do like to deliver results. And sometimes I can be, what's the word, attached to someone's outcome, mainly if they're a client. And that's because they're paying me. And I feel like I have to get some sort of a result. And so there's a bit of ego tied to it. But yeah, the more we can kind of work through the superiority, the more we can get through even our own barriers. Now, I want to riff on one of the things that you said is, there's a need to seek more knowledge. So this is one of the challenges of growth is because in order to grow, we have to seek information and seek knowledge. And when we do, oftentimes we realize there's so much more to it. And our wanting mechanism can want that more knowledge. And that can be the very trick that keeps us from our growth and healing. Because if we're constantly seeking more knowledge, we're not doing that work. But sometimes the knowledge is key to the work. So there is this catch 22 that a lot of times we can get caught into. So it's another nuance that makes the human experience so challenging, and it relates to the want.
Yeah. I think for me, when it comes to the want and the personal development, wanting more knowledge, I would say it came with shame. It
Yeah.
was it was deep shame that I wasn't good enough, or I still need to fix me, or there was something else that's wrong with me. That kind of nuance,
Yeah.
as you say. I love that. I love that. Really quickly, before I get further, this is going to be a little bit of a, we talked about Adler and he was a student of Freud, right? In my head, I have this story that Freud, Adler, and Jung are sitting in a round table. Freud said, well, our childhood is why we are the way we are, and this is just who we are. And Adler is like, well, bro, you're kind of right, but you can also change it. You don't have to really live there. You don't have to become it. You can do some things about it. And he's like, well, but look at all the psychology behind of it. Let's go. We have attachment styles, we have borderline personality disorder, all of the different levels of therapies a therapist can go into. People cover ADHD, management tools, all of these things, right? And he's like, yeah, but you have to. Adler's like, yeah, but you have to go back and you have to look at the beliefs that were created. What are the limiting beliefs? What age they were creating? Go deep. Find out how inferiority and superiority is showing up in your life right now, and go and divorce it from the past. Like have a meditation session, whatever you need to do. Go do some workshops, some retreats, and we're going to get all of this experience out of you, and you're going to be a new human being. And then Jung said, man, you guys are talking some real deep stuff right now. But without all of that, you still have to face the inner teen, because that's where all the beliefs became protection. And when you face that inner teen, that's a path to consciousness. So come on, let's get it together. Let's figure this out. But then nobody listened to them. So here we are having a podcast about what once.
About what they were saying. And I do want to say, you know how you're talking about there's all these challenges like attachment styles, borderline, ADHD. So remember I talked about the checklist? That's what it is. So when resistance reviews a want, it goes through the checklist. It checks to see your beliefs. Do you believe it's possible? More importantly, do you believe it's possible for you? And even deeper than that, do you believe you're deserving and enough for it? And then it's attachment style. What is your attachment style? So depending on what you're seeking, that's gonna affect if you can go after it or the amount of effort you put into it. And these other things, which is what I call a checklist. And yeah, unfortunately, the checklist is pretty long and no one person is talking about all the different items. So it's most people don't even know there's a checklist. Meaning, if you go to therapy, you're gonna hear things more around attachment styles and beliefs, but not some of the other stuff that personal development is uncovering. If you go to personal development, they'll talk about things like identity and self-image, but not the other stuff. So the challenge is people don't know what they don't know. And this is another challenge of the human experience. The way the brain works, unless it learns something, it can't take that leap to know what could be holding us back. And so if you haven't been taught it, we might not even know there is a block that exists. And because a lot of this is talked about very sporadically by Adler saying one thing, Jung saying another thing, Freud saying another thing. And so again, this is the challenge of the human experience in the inner world.
I agree so much with that assessment. Like, I love my little story about the three of
Yeah.
them because it's just like you're
Well,
absolutely right. Continue.
yeah. No, I love your story too. Though I did sense a little bit of superiority wanting to say it.
I guess you could say superiority.
Yeah.
I think
Or
it's
even a
more
little part of your
excitement.
ego. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whichever. I think it's important to have a healthy ego. I don't think we can get rid of ego completely. It's always going to be there.
I
Um,
never said any of this was bad or wrong.
I didn't
All we're
take it
doing
that
is,
way. I did
yeah.
not take it that way.
But I'm saying even everything we've talked about since the beginning,
Yeah.
no, it can sound like I might be saying wants are bad or resistance are bad. It's what it is
Yeah.
and it's how it's affecting us. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely didn't take it that way at all. I feel like whenever I have conversations with people, it's easier to use myself as an example, because
Yeah.
then I relate to me better than I can relate to someone else. So two people can have the same experience and have such different parts of it that will be completely unrelatable to the other. So it's
Yeah.
important to be able to share the different sides of it.
Yeah.
And I think I love the experiences with ego, because like you used Donald Trump as an example, right? I'm surprised to hear that you could say that you've had an ego that would make him look like a
Humble guy.
humble guy.
And I
And
say it literally. I don't say it.
yeah.
I say it literally. I'm not trying to like
Yeah.
extrapolate or what's the word. When I come to it, I'll say it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So when I say that, to also share that when I thought about it in that moment, as you were saying that, I also recognize that part in me, because if people knew the type of mother I was to my children, that was,
Yeah.
yes, very
Yeah.
much very much could make Donald Trump look humble as well. So I relate to that. Now,
Okay, yeah. So I'm glad you could see it because I think a lot of us have it. We just don't want to admit it. And when we don't admit it, it's when the problem perpetuates. In
mhm,
fact, Carl Jung himself said, and I'm going to butcher this quote, only when you can make the conscious, the
unconscious.
unconscious conscious can it stop having a hold on you?
Yeah.
And when we deny some of our characteristics, like having an inflated ego or being more self centered than we like to admit, it's what perpetuates the problem. In
Right.
fact, I think one of the challenges I do have with certain of the communities I was involved in is that there was a lot of, so I'll backtrack and say, what I'm finding is a lot of people go into personal development because it makes them feel good. Like there's this need to be good and kind. And the amount of bad things they'll do to make themselves look good, or how willing they're willing to put someone down so they can make themselves look good, that's going on. It's kind of crazy. And it's, I don't know, it's just this thing that's out there where people just need to feel good, like they're doing good, and need for others to know that they're good, and how much bad they'll do just to maintain that.
Yeah, that's very true. It's very hard to take in because, like, especially for me, for most people that I relate to, when I found out about the sexual abuse that happened in my family, and I was looking for other people who were, like on the other side of it, it was very difficult to find, right? But it was a lot of people who were saying what you should do or what you can do or whatever. But like going through the court system and understanding like there's so much is protected that, I mean, like here's this bad thing that happened, right? And then I have the evidence, I have the confession, I have the living, the fallout of it. But then the law said this person was not convicted, so they still have rights to access children. And I, the parent who's trying to protect my children, I was getting more of the flack for it. So when I see the things that are happening in the world with all of the unacknowledged trauma and the moral
Yeah,
betrayal that's happening, it feels a little like inferior in a way, because
yeah,
then it's no, the law is designed that unless you can prove between beyond a shadow of a doubt, and again this is just my interpretation, doesn't mean that that's what it is. If you can prove beyond the shadow of the doubt the intent, then nothing that's happened really matters until that moment has happened. And so how are people supposed to even understand that, this search for justice, it's a want, right? But it has to come from within. And so you're not going to be able to get it from the sources that you're looking for it from. It has to
yeah,
come from the internal, facing the internal resistance, facing
yeah.
the truth that I didn't want to face, facing what my part of that was, how, regardless of what's happened, what is it that now I can do based on this experience?
That reminds me of a quote that Alex Hermosi had on one of his posts I saw on Instagram. Some of the worst people you know think they're good.
Hmm.
Yeah.
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 Well, Cam, it's always a pleasure having conversations with you. Before we wrap up today, is there anything else that you want that I didn't cover or we didn't get to cover as far as the wants part of our conversation?
Yeah, there's a lot of regarding the wants we didn't cover. We talked about the overactive want. We
Hmm.
talked about the strong want. There are other wants such as the high want, specific want, conflicting wants, unaligned wants, as well as what I call the childish want. And I think we really went in a lot into the egoic want. I will say that from personal experience, I think all wants are ego. Even the desire for a glass of water is ego, because what does the water do? It extends our life. So that's kind of egoic to want to extend our life. Even when we're doing things that are generous, it's usually for a reason, to feel good, to plant our name, whatever, to make people think we're good, all of that. So I guess that's the last thing I would say, is that to toy with the idea that a lot of your desires are just ego.
Yeah. And I like your perspective on these things because I think you said it earlier. It could sound contradictory, and that's not the word that you use. I feel like you use a different word. That's just me paraphrasing. But it's going beyond what we think that these things mean, but actually looking at them for real. What does it really mean? Do I want to create a legacy, and do I want to leave something for my children so that they don't have the life that I did? Is that protecting them from the path that they should be going? And then on the other side of it, it's, well, I found a way to create generational blessings, and that can positively impact other people, by extension of who my children know and who they know. And it's
Yeah.
and leasing the control of what that can look like or how that is, and just be. And to be able to just be also means, well, I need to look at my desires. I need to look at my wants. I need to look at my resistances, because they all are going to lead me to something deeper within myself that I had no knowledge of in the first place. So it doesn't, to me, doesn't mean to be rigid and constantly looking to seek and to do and be more or be better, but it's also an exploration of, like, well, I don't know what you said, like, I don't know what I don't know, and what can I gain from this experience, or how does it help me grow, to be more in alignment with who I want to serve, or what is it that I want to do for my whatever that looks like for other people. For me, it's
Yeah.
my legacy for my children. It's being
Yeah.
able to cultivate something that feels good, like in the ego sense.
Yeah. 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 So I guess if there was one last thing based on what you're saying, is when you have a want and desire, don't just take it for face value, go deeper into it.
Yeah.
Look into why that want or desire is there. And if you're having a hard time of achieving it, instead of looking at the resistance or feeling bad or shame that you can't achieve it, look at how the want itself is creating the challenge. Is your want so strong that it's creating equally amounts of resistance? Do you have so many wants that it's nearly impossible to work on any one? Is your want ego driven, but you're trying to present it as self righteous because now there's a conflict. So, conflicting want. And those nuances will really help. Perfect. So, I've got 3 free guides for everyone listening here. One is called Instant Focus and Success, the other is End Sabotage or Procrastination and Sabotage, which is a deeper dive into the topic of internal resistance. And it goes into our wants, the causes of resistance, which we didn't really talk about, and we will talk about in the next podcast, as well as the tricks of resistance. So when resistance stops us, it uses tricks to stop us, and you can learn about that. And we'll cover that in the third podcast. But you can get that first guide, the second guide, and the third guide on real emotional intelligence, because everything we talked about actually shows up via emotions. And they can get it at kamknight.com, KAMKNIGHT.com. I have an awesome course called Conquer Internal Resistance, and it's a deeper dive than even the free guides, and they can get it at kamknight.com. And if you want to do one-on-one work with me, some of the deepest work I think that a person can do, I can take you into your unconscious and you can see all of this playing out. Reach out to me at coach@kamknight.com.
Beautiful. And I will say that if this episode, whoever is listening to this, if it resonates with you, the best thing that you can do is take action. And that action is, oh my gosh, I need to call Cam right now. I need to go on his website. I need to look at all of these information. There's free resources. If someone came to mind as you're listening to this, share it with them. Do not wait. I think the minute we start waiting, that's when it gets
Yeah.
further away from our truth. And Cam, you're somebody that, one of the reasons I have this specific podcast is because there's people that I believe in, and we all have such unique ways of connecting with others. Someone may listen to what you're sharing and it'll resonate so easily. And I truly believe that you have one of the many keys to the kingdom, so to speak. Your work will speak for itself, but just in the way that you describe it and you go about it, it's such a unique approach. And that's because it's a testament to the work that you do. And so I'm happy to amplify that and share that message as loudly and proudly as I can. So, with that said, thank you so much for being here today and having this conversation with me in the now, in the very, very now, and I'm looking forward to our next one. I also want to share really quickly, one of the things that I take pride in doing, maybe ego, is whenever I have a guest at the end of my podcast, I like to journal about what it is that I learned, what is something that I can take away from my own self. So I encourage anyone who's listening to this, see what fits. If it resonates and you want to explore more, he's already shared his information. You know where to find him. And I'm going to take off now so that I can go and see what comes up for me from this conversation. So thank you. We'll see you in the next one.